Good morning, students. Good morning to all. And last day we have studied about the recent advancement in the banking sector. So, what are the recent advancement in the banking sectors mean? First one is the electronic banking. Next one is Paytm and the debit card after the credit card, and some of the advancement was there. So today also we will just study what we have studied on last day, and we will go to the next topics. And today also we will go to the next concept, and within today these lessons will be get over. So today we will study about the recent issues in the banking sectors. So what are the recent issues in this banking is non-performing assets. Non-performing assets. So once the borrower fails to make interest on principal payments for 90 days, the loan is considered to be a non-performing assets. So once the borrower fails to make the interest or principal payments for 90 days, the loan is considered to be a non-performing assets. So the non-performing assets are problematic for financial institutions since they depend on interest payments for income. So normally all the banks, all the commercial banks will be have the income mostly depending on their rate of interest or the interest or paying the loans amount. If they are not able to providing the payment to the bank, or if they are maintaining the non-performing assets, so the banking will get failure. As estimated to be around 10 lakhs crores, the non-performing assets are there. So already more than a sum of 2 lakhs crores have been injected. Suppose if the banking sectors get failure like that, the government only have to take the effort to providing the claim of the losses. So this is the recent issues in the banking. Next, merger of banks. So nowadays, or not nowadays, the Reserve Bank of India have been decided to merge all the remaining 5 associates bank in 2017. So mostly all the scheduled bank and all the branch of the state bank, not the state bank groups. So the State Bank of Mysore, State Bank of Patiala, State Bank of Travancore, and the State Bank of Jaipur. So all type of the state banks are joining together, merged it together, and it was became as a state bank groups. Next, money market. So this is also one of the important concept in these lessons. So money market is the mechanism through which short-term funds loaned or borrowed. So it designates financial institutions which handle the purchase, sale, and transfer of short-term credit instruments. The commercial banks, acceptance houses, non-banking financial institutions, and the central bank are the institutions catering to the requirements of short-term funds in the money market. Next is the capital market. So the capital market is the financial part of the financial system, which is concerned with the raising capital by dealing in shares, bonds, and other long-term investments. If any of the banks or any of the financial institutions want to gathering the funds by dealing in shares, bonds, and other long-term investment, if they need a long-term investment, they will be approach the capital markets. Next, demonetizations. I think you may know about the demonetizations, because now the demonetization, the problematic of the demonetizations may be affected all the peoples throughout the world. So the demonetization is the act of stripping a currency unit of its status as a legal tender. Normally, if you have some amount of the money which has the value. So the demonetization is the act of stripping a currency unit of its status as a legal tender. So it occurs whenever there is a change of national currencies. So normally it will never happen often and again and again. If a government want to stop the corruptions and the effectively monetary policies, the demonetizations act will be happens. So the current form or forms of money is pulled from the circulations. So often to be replaced with the new coins or notes. On 18th November 2016, the Indian Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi announced the demonetization of all 500 and 100 rupees banknotes. So, however, more than 99% of those currencies came back to the Reserve Bank of India. So, before the 2016, we have used or some of the 500 and 1000 rupees note was in circulations. But by the purpose of stopping the corruptions and stopping the terror funds and removing the black money, so the Prime Minister Modi was introduced the demonetizations. After that, because of that, the 500 rupees notes and the 1000 rupees notes was stopped in the circulated. So all the money, all the denominations currency was went to the Reserve Bank itself. Next, objectives of demonetizations. So what are the objectives are there in this demonetizations active? First one is removing black money from the country. How the demonetizations act will be removing the black money from the country means so many of the peoples will have the money or will hold their money in unofficially. Now if the currency which has already existing in the circulated, if it is stopped, the black money also will be removed. Because we must exchange, we must use the money or new introduced money only. So when we are removing the existing currency, it will never come to circulated. Next, stopping of corruptions. So this is also in the same way only. So by the way of demonetizations, so the corruption will come to stop. If you want to corrupt, we have to provide the new currencies. But in the beginning time, no one will get more new currencies. How much amount of old currencies we have in our hand itself, we must exchange it for the new currencies. So beyond one level, so if we have more currencies, we have to pay tax. Otherwise, we will never exchange the new currencies instead of old existing currency. Next, stopping terror funds. Normally, the funds always will be used by the terrors in the old currencies only. By introducing the new currencies, they will never use the old currencies. And if they need the new currencies, they must come to have the dealing with the proper money market. Next, curbing fake notes. So already so many of the fraudulent activities peoples may made more fake notes. So if we are introducing the new currencies notes, the fake notes also will be stopped to circulate. Okay students, the sixth chapter has been over. Next, the chapter 7. The chapter 7 is international economics. The subject international economics evolved from a simple theory of international trade. It was formulated to answer a few basic questions. The subject first originated in Western Europe on account of increasing importance of foreign trade in the part of the world. So after finding out the importance of the foreign trade only, the international economy, the subject also improved. So the contributions of classical economists like Adam Smith, David Ricardo, Dosick, and J.S. Mill shaped the subject matter of international economics. So the international economics studies the entire range of international economic transactions that consist of not only trade in goods and services, but also capital flows, how the capital will be moving from one nation to another one of the nations, and the technology transfers. Some of the technologies will be moved from one nation to another one of the nations, and the rate of exchange. When we are involving in this international trade, the rate of exchange will be followed, and the rate of exchange also will be changed from one nation to another one of the nations. When we are changing the exchange, the balance of payment will be there, and issue relating to the tariffs, protection, free trade, investment flows, role of fiscal and monetary policies pursued by the individual countries. So the meaning of international trade, if you are understanding the meaning of international economies. So the international economics is the branch of economics which is concerned with the exchange of goods and services between two or more countries. So normally we have studied in our internal trade how the market is produced, how the commodity has been going to produced, and how it will be selling in the market. But if the goods are going to exchange between the two or more countries, that is called international economics. Hence, the subject matter is mainly related to the foreign trade. So those who are going to involved in this foreign trade and whichever institutions are there will be dealt by the international economics. In other words, international economics is a specialized field of economics which deals with the economic interdependence among countries and studies the effect of such interdependence and the factors that affect it. So what are the factors will be going to affect the international economics and some of the economic interdependence among the countries? Now all the nations are involving in this international trade because no nations will have self-reliance to producing any of the commodities. Some of the nations will have more natural resources which has able to produce the industrial sectors or the oil field. Some of the agricultural nations will have the natural resources which has able to producing the agricultural sectors such as crops. So every nations must be have the relationship with the other nations. So how one nation is going to make the relationship with the other nations? How the goods and the peoples and the factors of production is going to transfer from one place to another place is exposed and explained by the international economics. Next, subject matter of international economics. The subject matter of international economics include large number of segments which are classified into the some of the parts, following parts. So first one is pure theory of trade. In this international economics, the pure theory of trade is also will be there. This components explains the causes for foreign trade, why the foreign trade was arised, and some of the compositions. What are the compositions are there in this international trade? The direction and volume of trade. Next, determinations of the terms of trade. What are the factors will be determine the terms of trade? So, and the exchange rate and issues related to balance of trade and balance of payment. So, the balance of trade mean, so the trade, the goods and services, the exchange, the goods and services have to be equal. And because of that, if you are paying in the form of currencies, that also have to be equal. Balance, that is called the balance of payments. So in this pure theory of trade, we will study these all things. Next, policy issues. So under this part, policy issues such as free trade versus protections. Free trade mean if any of the nations will have the open gate to make the dealing with another nation, that is called free trade. Next, method of regulating trade. In whichever methods are there to regulate the foreign trade, and capital and technology flows. How the capital and technology is going to change from one nation to another of the nations, and use of taxations. How the international trade, all the nations are going to impose the tax for the international traders. Next, subsidies and dumping, exchange control and convertibility, foreign aids, external foreign borrowings and foreign direct investments. Foreign direct investment mean already we have studied. So the foreigners also will be able to make the investment in the another nations. So measures of correcting disequilibrium in the balance of payment, etc. are covered. So the policy issues always will be covered such as these things. Next, international cartels and blocs. So this part deals with the economic integrations in the form of international cartels, customs union, monetary unions, trade blocs, economic unions, and some also. Next, international financial and regulatory institutions. So the financial institutions like the International Monetary Fund, IBRD, World Trade Organization, etc., which influence the international economic transactions and relations, shall also be the part of international economies. So if you want to continue to maintain the relationship among the countries, so all the nations must be has the financial aid. So what are the financial aids are there to maintaining the international trade is explained by the international financial and regulatory institutions. So the four subject matter is there in this international economics: the pure theory of trade, policy issues, international cartels and blocs, and international financial and regulatory institutions. We will study very elaborately in later. Next, trade. So what's the meaning of trade? So normally we have studied, we know already that term trade means exchange of goods, wares and merchandise among the peoples. So normally if the goods and services is going to exchange between the people or buyer and seller, it is called trade. So the trade is of two types. So we can classify the trade as a two types. First one is internal trade and the international trade. So internal trade. So the internal trade refers to the exchange of goods and services within the political and geographical boundaries of one nation is called internal trade. So within the political and geometrical boundaries, if you are producing or if the produced commodity is going to the market for selling purpose, it is called internal trade. So what are the product is produced within the boundaries of one nations? So the product is consumed by the same people of the nation is called internal trade. So this is also known as domestic trade or home trade or intra-regional trade. Next, international trade. So I think you may know about the international trade. So international trade refers to the trade or exchange of goods and services between two or more countries. If the goods and services or exchange of goods and services between two or more countries, that is called international trade. Some of the product is produced from one countries and it was consumed by the another countries. It was sold in the another countries is called international trade. Next, some of the difference between internal trade and international trade. So if you are considering the internal trade, so the internal trade take place between different individuals and firms within the same nations. So all the individual peoples and the families within the same nations will be occurs. So the international trade take place between different individuals and families in different countries. So many of the multinational companies, and if the producers may be in one countries and the sellers and the consumers also will be in another one countries. And if you are considering the international trade, the labor and capital move freely from one region to another. So within the boundaries of one nations, so the labor and the capital can easily move from one region to another of the nations. But here, the labor and the capital do not move easily from one nation to another of the nations. So for that, so many of the rules and regulations are there. So on the basis of the rules and regulations only, so the labor and the capital can move. Next, in this internal trade, there will be free flow of goods and services since there are no restrictions. So in this internal trade, there is no restrictions because under the only one government, the state or central government only, so the productions and the distributions and the consumers will be happens. So there will be free flow of goods and services. But here, the goods and services do not easily move from one country to another since there are number of restrictions like tariff and quota. So many of the nations also will have maintained or will be drawn in the international trade. So on the basis of drawn tariff and quota only, the goods and services will be moved one country to another one of the countries. Some of the nations may have imposed more tariffs. Some of the nations will be free into the international trade. So in this internal trade, there is only common currency. So according to the India, the rupees only is going to use for exchange the commodity. But here there are different currencies because many countries will come to the international trade. So all the nations must be have some amount of the foreign currencies. So there is different currencies. Next, the physical and geographical conditions of a country are more or less similar. But here there are difference in physical and geographical conditions of two countries. So when the two more countries are there, so the difference in physical and geographical conditions. So some of the labor, natural resources also will be changed, but here not like that. So in this internal trade, the trade and financial regulations are more or less the same. So the financial and the trade regulations always may be sometime more or sometime less. So the trade and financial regulations such as interest rate, trade laws differ between countries because every country has some of the interest rate on their borrowed monies, and some of the laws also will be very free in one countries, and some of the nations will using the more restricted trade laws. So the trade laws always will be differ between the countries. Here, there is no difference in political affiliations, customs, and habits of the people and government policies. Because if the government impose any of the policies, these policies only will be equal to all the peoples and the customs and the politicians also. But here not like that. The differences are pronounced in political affiliations, habits and customs of the people and government policies. If any of the government policies sometimes will be affect the other policies of another nations. So this is the 7 difference are there. Okay students, if you have any doubt please ask me. Thank you.